Amid the protracted crisis around Greenland and Washington's wavering position, diplomatic circles are increasingly discussing information that China has begun cautiously but persistently probing opportunities to expand its influence in the Arctic, using the existing uncertainty as a window of opportunity. According to sources familiar with behind-the-scenes contacts, Beijing has conveyed through closed channels to the Danish side a signal of willingness to provide support in the event of further pressure from the United States. But this support, as emphasized, is not military in nature and does not involve direct confrontation. It concerns a set of pressure tools, diplomatic, economic, infrastructural, and legal, that China has repeatedly used in other regions of the world. In Beijing, the view is that modern security is less and less ensured by tanks and ships, and increasingly by supply chains, investments, markets, and control over logistics. It is in this logic, analysts say, that China's proposal is formulated. In exchange, Beijing offers Denmark expanded Arctic cooperation, deeper joint projects in infrastructure, logistics, and scientific research, and a revision of the format of the alliance with the United States. Sources emphasize that this is not about breaking ties with Washington. That would be too abrupt and risky step. The Chinese formula is different: diversification. Beijing proposes that Copenhagen not rely exclusively on a single security guarantor, but build a more multi-vector model in which the United States remains a partner but ceases to be the sole pillar. Chinese analytical reports emphasize that recent events have demonstrated the limits of American guarantees even for closest allies. From Beijing's perspective, the Greenland crisis became a clear example of how unpredictable policies can endanger the sovereignty of an allied country. Against this backdrop, China seeks to carefully convey the idea that the world has changed and previous security formulas no longer work automatically. According to insiders, Chinese diplomats emphasize that Beijing does not demand immediate decisions and does not impose ultimatums. On the contrary, the focus is on a long game, gradual rapprochement, and the creation of alternatives that over time will themselves shift the balance. In this sense, China's proposal appears not as a sharp turn, but as an expansion of opportunities for Denmark. At the same time, experts note that this tactic pursues a broader goal: to ultimately drive a wedge between allies within the Western Bloc, amplifying internal contradictions against what many call the chaotic and impulsive policy of Donald Trump. Chinese strategists, analysts say, operate under the assumption that the West is weakening itself today, and Beijing's task is not to obstruct this process, but to carefully accelerate it, offering alternatives to those beginning to doubt the old order. In this context, particular attention was drawn to Trump's statement about being ready to offer every resident of Greenland $1 million as part of the idea of buying the island. This gesture in Europe and beyond was perceived not so much as a real economic calculation, but as a symbolic demonstration of an approach in which complex questions of sovereignty and security are reduced to money. It is here, analysts note, that an interesting contrast arises with the Chinese model. Beijing, according to sources, does not intend to make flashy cash offers or speak of directly buying loyalty. Instead, China can offer long-term investments in infrastructure, access to its markets, participation in large-scale logistics projects, development of Arctic routes, and integration of Greenland and Denmark into a broader economic ecosystem. This approach may not appear as striking in headlines, but in the long term it could prove far more attractive. Experts emphasize that China knows how to work in regions where there is a deficit of confidence in the future, offering not quick money, but a sense of stability and inclusion in global processes. This, analysts say, is what makes the Chinese proposal potentially dangerous for the United States. It does not require breaking alliances, it does not provoke immediate conflict, but it gradually erodes Washington's exclusive role as a security guarantor. For Denmark, such a scenario presents a difficult dilemma. On one hand, Copenhagen remains part of the Western world and is not interested in a sharp turn. On the other hand, the events of recent months have forced serious reflection on how reliable existing guarantees are. In this context, even a symbolic offer from China is perceived as an indicator of the depth of the crisis. The very fact that such ideas are being discussed shows how strategic thinking has changed. Analysts note that China in this case acts extremely cautiously, avoiding steps that could be interpreted as intervention or aggression. All signals are given in the format of if needed and within international law. This rhetoric allows Beijing to maintain the image of a responsible actor while simultaneously increasing its influence. Ultimately, observers emphasize, the question is not whether Denmark will accept a specific proposal, but that the very possibility of an alternative already undermines the previous US monopoly on the security of its allies. And this, analysts say, is exactly what China seeks. Against the backdrop of loud and often contradictory statements from Trump, Beijing is shaping the image of a quiet, calculated, and predictable partner ready to operate over the long term. If this strategy succeeds, Greenland may become not the object of military confrontation, but a symbol of a transition to a new phase of global politics, where influence is determined not by the force of ultimatums, but by the ability to offer a sustainable alternative. And this, experts believe, is the main risk for the United States. Not the loss of a specific island, but the loss of exclusive status as the sole security guarantor in a world that is increasingly becoming multipolar. Against this backdrop, experts increasingly emphasize that China's strategy regarding Denmark and Greenland is built around time and patience, rather than abrupt gestures. Beijing, according to sources, is not seeking a quick response, and certainly does not expect formal agreements in the near term. Its calculation is based on gradually changing the context in which decisions are made. The longer the uncertainty from the United States persists, the higher the value of alternative options. In this logic, China strengthens its presence in the Arctic through scientific expeditions, investments in ports and logistics, participation in climate programs and Arctic forums, shaping the image of a responsible and engaged actor. This approach allows Beijing to frame security not as a military category, but as a set of resilient connections, economic, technological, and institutional. Analysts note that this framework may be most appealing to countries weary of ultimatum-driven policies. At the same time, China signals its readiness to use international platforms, from the UN to Arctic councils, to reinforce the principle of the inadmissibility of coercive pressure on allies, thereby expanding the space for Denmark's diplomatic maneuvering. In Washington, such steps cause irritation because they do not provide grounds for a hard response, but gradually erode established lines of influence. The result is a situation in which China does not directly take allies from the United States, but creates conditions in which allies begin to seek balance themselves. Observers note that this is what makes the current moment particularly sensitive. Even if formally nothing changes, strategic thinking is changing irreversibly. In this configuration, Greenland becomes not the object of a deal or a cause for conflict, but a marker of a new era in which security is determined not by a single center of power, but by the ability of states to build flexible and multi-layered partnerships.